Good day. This presentation examines the relationship between climate change and flood risk in Iowa from an environmental health perspective. Flooding has long been one of Iowa's most significant environmental hazards. It affects communities, agriculture, infrastructure, and public health. Recent changes in precipitation patterns have increased concerns about future flood risk across the Midwest. Using Iowa as a case study, this presentation explores how climate change may influence flooding and how those changes affect human health, animal health, ecosystem health, public policy, and community resilience. This recorded presentation expands on information shown in each slide. The focus is not simply on flooding as an environmental event, but on how environmental changes influence health, outcomes, and community preparedness. Throughout the presentation, Iowa serves as an example of how climate-related risks affect people, animals, ecosystems, and public infrastructure. The 2008 flood remains one of the most significant disasters in Iowa history. After weeks of heavy rainfall, rivers across the state reached record levels, causing widespread damage. In Cedar Rapids, the Cedar River crested at more than 31 feet. Large sections of the city were flooded, thousands of residents were displaced, and businesses and critical facilities were heavily damaged. The impact extended far beyond property loss. Residents faced contaminated floodwaters, disruption in healthcare, displacement from their homes, and significant emotional and financial stress. The flood also became a turning point. Communities across Iowa invested in better forecasting, flood mapping, mitigation projects, and long-term resilience planning. Many of today's flood management strategies grew from lessons learned in 2008. Although the 2008 flood is the primary case study, flooding is only one of several environmental hazards affecting Iowa. The state experiences floods, droughts, tornadoes, severe storms, winter weather, and extreme heat. More recently, the 2020 derecho demonstrated how quickly environmental hazards can disrupt daily life and damage critical infrastructure. These events affect transportation, utilities, healthcare access, agriculture, and local economies. Their public health impacts often continue long after the disaster ends. As weather-related disasters become more costly and disruptive, communities must focus on preparedness as well as response. Understanding long-term environmental risks help reduce vulnerability before disaster occurs. Flooding remains one of Iowa's most significant environmental hazards. The state's river systems, combined with heavy rainfall and changing precipitation patterns, create conditions that support both river flooding and flash flooding. Recent events have shown that flood impacts can extend far beyond traditional flood-prone areas. Urban communities may experience stormwater flooding, while rural communities may face prolonged agricultural losses. Flooding affects homes, businesses, roads, utilities, and agriculture. These impacts create challenges that reach far beyond economic and infrastructure. From a public health perspective, flooding increases the risk of energy, climate change, and heavy rainfall. One of the clearest ways climate change influences flooding is through precipitation. As temperatures rise, the atmosphere can hold more moisture. When storms develop, that moisture can be released as heavy rainfall. Scientists have observed increases in heavy precipitation events across much of the Midwest, including Iowa. While annual rainfall varies from year to year, individual storms are becoming more intense. This matters because flooding is often driven by how much rain falls over a short period of time. Heavy rainfall can saturate soils, overwhelm drainage systems, and rapidly increase runoffs into rivers and streams. Although climate change does not directly cause every flood, it can create conditions that make flooding more likely. Understanding this relationship helps communities prepare for future risks. The map shown on this slide illustrates projected increases in spring precipitation across much of the Midwest, including Iowa. These projections help explain why flood risks remains a growing concern for communities throughout the region. Flooding is influenced by both natural processes and human activities. Anthropogenic causes originate from human actions. The most familiar example is greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, industry, agriculture, and energy production. These emissions contribute to warming temperatures and changing precipitation patterns. Human development also affects how water moves across the landscape. Roads, parking lots, and buildings prevent rainfall from soaking into the ground. Instead, water moves quickly into drainage systems and waterways. The loss of wetlands creates another challenge. Wetlands naturally absorb and store excess water. When they are removed, communities lose an important layer of flood protection. While human activities do not create every flood, they can increase flood severity and overall risk. Flooding is also a natural part of Iowa's environment. Heavy rainfall remains one of the most common causes of flooding. When large amounts of rain fall quickly, rivers and streams can rise beyond their capacity. Saturated soils make the situation worse because additional water cannot easily be absorbed. Snowmelt can also contribute to flooding. When combined with rainfall, melting snow can raise river levels and place additional pressure on the flood control system. Recent flooding in northwest Iowa during 2024 reminds us that the natural weather conditions alone can produce severe flood events. Understanding these natural processes help communities manage flood risk while preparing for future environmental changes. Flooding affects public health both during and after a disaster. Immediate risks include drowning, injury, electrocution, vehicle accidents, and exposure to contaminated floodwaters. Floodwater often contains sewage, chemicals, fuel, and other contaminants that increase the risk of illness. Long-term impacts can be equally significant. Mold growth in damaged buildings may affect respiratory health, while disruptions to transportation and healthcare systems can limit access to medical services and medications. Mental health effects are also common. Anxiety, stress, depression, and emotional trauma can persist long after the floodwaters recede. Certain groups face greater risks than others, including older adults, children, individuals with disabilities, and low-income households. These disparities highlight the importance of public health planning before disasters occur. Reducing flood-related health risks begin with effective surveillance and monitoring. Iowa has become a national leader through the Iowa Flood Center and the Iowa Flood Information System, or IFIS. These programs collect real-time information from stream gauges, rainfall stations, weather radar, and other monitoring systems across the state. The data are combined with forecasting models to predict flood conditions before they occur. Emergency managers, public health officials, and local governments use this information to support evacuations, road closures, resource deployment, and public communication. From a public health perspective, surveillance saves lives by providing early warning and reducing uncertainty. Monitoring systems help communities prepare before conditions become dangerous. The map shown here illustrates the statewide monitoring network used by the Iowa Flood Information System. Hundreds of monitoring locations provide the real-time information needed to track changing flood conditions and support forecasting efforts. The impact of climate change and flooding extends beyond human populations. Livestock operations may experience injury, displacement, stress, reduced access to food and water, and increased exposure to disease. Floodwaters can contaminate feed supplies, damage facilities, and disrupt routine animal care. Wildlife populations face similar challenges. Flooding can alter habitats, reduce food availability, disrupt migration patterns, and affect reproduction. These concerns highlight the One Health concept, which recognizes that human health, animal health, and environmental health are closely connected. When flooding affects animals and ecosystems, the consequences are often extended to food systems, local economies, and community well-being. As flood risk increases, understanding animal health impacts become an important part of environmental health planning. The One Health graphic on this slide illustrates that relationship. The image of flooded livestock provides a practical example of how flood events can affect animal welfare, agriculture operations, food systems, and ultimately human communities. Flooding can significantly affect ecosystem health throughout Iowa's watersheds. As floodwaters move across the landscape, they carry sediment, nutrients, and pollutants into rivers, streams, lakes, and wetlands. One major concern in Iowa is nutrient runoff. Heavy rain can transport nitrogen and phosphorus from agricultural land into waterways. Excess nutrients can contribute to water quality problems and harmful algae blooms. Flooding can also accelerate erosion, damage habitats, and affect biodiversity. At the same time, healthy ecosystems help reduce flood impacts. Wetlands, floodplains, reptan buffers absorb water, slow runoff, improve water quality, and reduce erosion. This demonstrates an important public health principle. Protecting ecosystems strengthens community resilience while supporting long-term environmental sustainability. The harmful algae bloom warning shown on the slide provided is an example of how nutrient pollution can affect waterways following periods of heavy rain and flooding. One of the most encouraging outcomes of Iowa's flood experience is the response that followed. After the 2008 flood, state and local leaders recognized the need for better forecasting, hazard mapping, public education, and preparedness. These efforts contributed to the creation of the Iowa Flood Center, which has become a leader in flood forecasting and monitoring. Cedar Rapids provides a strong example of adaptation and resilience. Following catastrophic losses in 2008, the city invested in flood walls, levees, pump stations, floodgates, and property acquisition programs designed to reduce future risks. Rather than simply rebuilding, community leaders use science, engineering, and planning to create a more resilient system. This illustrates a key public health lesson. Effective policy can reduce vulnerability before disasters ever occur. Investments in preparedness and mitigation often provide benefits long before they are needed. The flood inundation map shown on this slide illustrates the extent of flooding experienced during the 2008 disaster. The scale of that event helps drive many of the policy changes, infrastructure investments, and resilient initiatives that followed. Scientific evidence is only part of the climate change discussion. Public perception strongly influences how communities respond to environmental challenges. Across Iowa, opinions vary regarding climate change, environmental policy, and adaptation strategies. Agriculture, economics, politics, and personal experience all shape these perspectives. This diversity of opinion can make it difficult to build consensus around climate adaptation and resilient planning. At the same time, communities that experience flooding and severe weather often become more aware of environmental risks. Public health professionals play an important role in communicating risk and help communities make informed decisions. Successful adaptation requires more than scientific knowledge. It also requires public engagement, trust, and cooperation. Flooding remains one of the most significant environmental and public health challenges facing Iowa communities. This presentation has examined how climate change may contribute to increased flood risk through heavier precipitation and changing weather patterns. It has also explored the effects of flooding on human health, animal health, ecosystems, infrastructure, and community well-being. The Iowa experience demonstrates that communities are not powerless in the face of environmental changes. Investments in forecasting, surveillance, ecosystem protection, public education, and infrastructure can reduce vulnerability and improve preparedness. Programs such as the Iowa Flood Center and the Iowa Flood Information System help communities anticipate and respond to environmental hazards. Likewise, local initiatives in Cedar Rapids demonstrate how lessons learned from disaster can be transformed into long-term resilience. Iowa's investments in forecasting, hazard mapping, and flood resilience provide a model that can be adapted by communities facing similar climate-related challenges around the world. As climate conditions continue to evolve, collaboration among public health professionals, scientists, policymakers, emergency managers, and community members will remain essential. Communities that understand their risks and prepare proactively will be better positioned to protect health, reduce losses, and adapt to future environmental changes. Thank you for your time and attention. The following references were used in the preparation of this presentation and provides additional information regarding climate change, flooding, environmental health, public health surveillance, resilience planning, and community adaptation. Thank you.